Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and welcome to another Indie Game Friday, where each week I take a look at a different independent computer role-playing game. This week I'm taking a look at a Cyberpunk-styled Blobber dungeon crawler, Conglomerate 451. Developed by Runeheads and published by 1C Entertainment, it was released on Steam in February of 2020. Conglomerate 451 is, as mentioned, a cyberpunk-set first-person Blobber-style dungeon crawler with procedurally generated levels and missions. It has 3 difficulty levels, which affects not only the monster strength, but also the resources that you get, as well as a selection between story mode and endless mode. Aside from the dungeon crawler aspect, there is a base building and improvement aspect of the game, where you can improve the technology and equipment you have access to, as well as the actual characters that you can put into play. In terms of plot, the year is 2099, and Sector 451 of the city of Conglomerate has been overrun with crime funded by 4 corporations. The city government has authorized the use of battle clones, expendable clones of combat operatives that can be customized, assembled into teams, and then sent out on dangerous missions. You play the head of one such team, and after a brief test, you are given command of your own agency to build up and maintain your team of clones. The game consists of 2 primary sections: building up and managing your team in the base, and exploring the world out on missions. Your base has a number of sections and a number of resources required to make use of them. The resources you get are reputation, which is gained through completing missions, credits, which are used to purchase basically everything and are gained from missions as well as found during exploration, lifeine, and then tech, which is used for research as well as upgrading materials. In the base campaign, you have a limited number of weeks to clear the sector as well, with each mission advancing the week count. Within the base, you have several sections. The quarters, which can be reviewed and you can use to upgrade your various units, the cloning center, where you can create new units, the research center, where you can improve what abilities your base has, the health center, where you can treat your units, the cyber graveyard, where you can view retired units, the director's office, where you can review overall perks and stats, the archive, and then finally the mission launch screen. In the quarters, when you're reviewing each of your units here, they're defined primarily by class and rank. Classes define the skills that they have available as well as their base equipment. As they survive missions, their progress towards their next rank improves, and when they advance a rank, they can select between 3 traits, which are class dependent. Each unit has a fair number of stats. There's hit points, which are the overall health, shield that absorbs damage taken, movement that governs just how far the group as a whole can move, initiative that can tell you how fast you move in the turn order, vision that is effectively your accuracy rate, attack that tells you how powerful your attacks are, range that governs how far you can attack, critical hit multiplier for when you land critical hits, crit hit chance that of course shows the chance to crit hit, defense that reduces damage taken before shields, base damage that shows how much damage you do per attack, survival instinct which gives a % chance to survive when mortally wounded but not down, hacking that shows you your chance to hack things, hardware that shows your chance to disassemble objects, humanity that shows how close you are to madness, and your win and loss mission totals with your age displayed in weeks for each unit. Each character has resistances that show their chance of avoiding an effect entirely: stun, EMP, radiation, debuff, shock, disorder, mark, and trauma, each of which is a special effect that you can be subjected to due to some attack. There's also equipment slots for each character. The first 3 equipment slots are set by background or class, which can be upgraded with SPU slots, each of which can be found during a particular mission, and you can also purchase them. Characters have 1 weapon, a shield unit, a cipher unit for hacking, and then you can equip up to 4 cybernetic implants, 1 in the head, 1 in the body, 1 in the arms, and 1 in the legs. If you have higher tech unlocked, you can actually upgrade the individual equipment you have in each slot. Characters can equip up to 4 skills into memory blocks. These skills are based on their character class and are used in combat. Finally, characters can have a number of special traits based on their DNA, any special abilities they've unlocked, perks that they've earned from leveling up, as well as traumas, disorders, and shades that you've acquired during missions. The Cloning Center is where you create your new units. They take credits to create, and you can select their background or class, which are unlocked as you gain reputation, then their 4 starting skills. You can always equip different skills back in the quarters. You can also unlock DNA mutations through research, which can grant special bonuses. Characters sharing the same background and skills do have some minor variation in their starting stats, even though they are technically clones of the same person. The Research Center lets you expend credits and tech to unlock additional abilities. There's 5 research trees overall: cloning research that improves your character creation, healing research that improves how you can treat traumas, pain, and other injuries, training research that affects how far you can advance the various units' skills, military research that does something similar but for weapons and armor, and then the cyber research that unlocks your various implants. Each one has a sort of tree that you have to advance by selecting nodes in the order that they appear. The Health Center lets you treat characters' accrued pain and intoxication, both of which are preserved for mission to mission, although your overall hit points are restored between missions. The Cyber Graveyard is exactly what it seems. You can review your retired agents there, while the Director's Office lets you see the proficiencies your agency accrues as a whole: your max roster size, the shield recharge power, how many extra credits you get during a mission, how much extra tech you can get during a mission, the chance of mastering a skill during a mission, the chance of removing trauma, as well as disorders, and then the discount for researching each of the technology trees. You can also get sent special missions which are received here between other missions. Finally, there's the mission selection screen itself. This is where you can see which corporations still have influence over the sector, as well as how much influence they have, as well as how many successes and how far into each section you've progressed. There's 6 sections in all: the Hive, the Anthill, the Sanctuary, the Forge, the Deep, and the Spire. Each one unlocks as you progress through the game and has its own visual style and enemy roster, as well as its own bosses. When you start a new mission, you are given choices of missions available, which show the objectives, the section that it's in, the difficulty, the corporation involved, as well as the rewards. You can also modify your team layout here, forming a team of up to 3 characters. Once you select a mission, you can choose to start in the city or at the mission location itself. Starting in the city puts you in the streets near the mission, which can give you the chance to run into other enemies, but also encounter various store NPCs and services, where you can purchase equipment, temporary buffs, and so forth for the mission ahead. Starting at the mission location itself simply puts you directly in the mission building if you don't feel that you need any extra resources. During the exploration phase, you are put into a grid-based first-person map. You can free look around, but movement is based on the 4 cardinal directions. Your objective is listed at the top of the screen, beside which is your assistant bot. To the left is your current party layout, and in the lower right is your local map. You can right-click and hold to see more information and options. You can review each character's stats, as well as see the resources picked up in this mission so far. You can also try to execute various actions, many of which are actually locked for combat. Moving the squad in combat, which is based on your slowest character. Combat hacking, which can enable you to try to debuff enemies for a battery cost. Skip your turn, in combat. Use drugs, also in combat, to give yourself various boosts. View the character sheet, and recharge the character shields, which also cost battery. When you're moving about, you can interact with marked materials, including containers that can give you loot and objects, find battery terminals to recharge your party's batteries, as well as interact with objects for quests. You can also hit Shift to perform a scan of the area. This is primarily used to find objects that you can attempt to disassemble to gain SPUs. Some of the items you interact with will open hacking screens or disassembly screens. This costs battery level to do either one and gives you the chance to select a character with the highest success rate. Both are timed minigames. Hacking makes you try to rotate differently shaped rings about to make them interlock within a time limit, while the disassembly minigame has you hitting enter as you rotate various squares, passing over connections, before the object in question overheats, again putting a timer on it. Hacking something will give you access, mostly past locked doors, while the disassembly minigame will give you an SPU that you can later slot into a piece of equipment. Finally, during the course of exploration, you will undoubtedly come close to an enemy and trigger combat. Enemies can move around exposed squares to position themselves, and if they are behind cover, they can't be targeted. Your party can move on its turn as well, which is limited by the slowest party member. Combat proceeds in turns based on initiative. During a character's turn, they can select a skill, either a buff or an attack, and then a target. You can, with some skills, target particular portions of an opponent, which affects the chance to hit, as well as any secondary effects from the target. For instance, taking a headshot on humanoid targets is more difficult, but can have dramatic effects if you land it. Each target also has a type: cyborg, android, human, etc. They are all affected slightly differently by certain attacks, and some attacks have clear bonuses against them. During a character's turn, they can try to use up any of the combat-locked options I mentioned above. This may take up their turn, except for hacking, which actually you can attempt to buff a friendly or debuff an enemy's system, limited only by the amount of battery power you have left on that character, after which you can still take the character's usual turn. Combat proceeds in turns, with shields being whittled down first and then health. Living enemies can be dropped into a mortal wound state, during which any damage will kill them. If they are left alone, they get a survival check, with a success meaning that they stand up with a bit of health on their next turn. This can be frustrating in some situations, so be sure you have the ability to finish them off. All in all, though, it plays like any other Blobber in that regard, save that the levels are procedurally generated. When you return to base, you simply refit your party, manage your team and their pain and their intoxication levels, and improve your base and equipment, making any other new units you need, and then repeat. As far as art and presentation goes, Conglomerate 451 has a rather nice art style with a definite cyberpunk aesthetic through and through. I do have a mild issue with some of the color scheme choices. Since your scan highlights potential SPU containing objects in yellow, it can be confusing in rooms where there's already a lot of yellow objects. Some of the areas are so busy that it can be hard to note containers, but that's mitigated by the fact that the containers themselves aren't identical within a given area, so you kind of get used to just looking for that particular object. The music is decent. I wouldn't say it's going to stand out, but it's decent enough for the genre, and it didn't make me want to turn it off. The writing is average. In terms of missions, it's enough to get you on track. The storyline feels a little tired, and it seems like they came up with the title first as a play on Fahrenheit 451, and then wrote the generic cyberpunk storyline back from that. That's not to totally trash it, since I can name a number of fantasy-based dungeon crawlers that are based on pretty generic fantasy tropes, and they still work. There are these quips that the assistant bot uses after every single combat that are basically rehashes of things that you'd hear in popular culture or lines from other movies and games, so they get very old very quickly. The interface is also quite awkward, with so much access by right-clicking the mouse to open a submenu that only stays open while you have that mouse button laid down, and many of those options actually commonly used. I can't help but think that some of the stuff could have been moved to the main interface or given its own direct hotkey, which is not the case. My most serious criticism of Conglomerate 451 through and through, though, everything considered, is just, it's kind of boring. The graphics are decent, yes, but the procedural generation of the levels just make them feel all the same and uninteresting. Like, more so than most roguelike-based map generators that I've played, and that's usually their biggest weakness, so saying that it's even worse is, kind of saying something. The missions are also of very similar types as well. I mean, that's to be expected in one of these things. The equipment upgrades in the form of SPUs also seem just randomly generated blandness, with differences between them, but a lot of it's just statistical noise. Very little stands out. In a way, the base building and the itemization of the game reminds me strongly of Darkest Dungeon, even down to the area unlocks for the particular missions. Except that Darkest Dungeon does it well. In Conglomerate 451, it just felt bland. I didn't mind the combat, even though it too was a little bit of a bland feel, although I guess that's because I've got a higher tolerance for boring combat on my end. I find it endearing rather than subtracting from the whole experience. I feel like the complexity of the stats and subsystems in Conglomerate 451 work against it. There's so much potential there, but it all feels vaguely wasted since, again, it just seems to end up being statistical noise. All in all, the game has a lot of style, but the substance is sort of thin. I would definitely not recommend it at full price, but if you like Blobbers and can find it on sale or as part of a bundle like I did, it may be worth your while. It certainly looks nice enough, I will give it that, and it's nice to see non-fantasy dungeon crawlers around, although now, sci-fi style settings and cyberpunk style settings are getting a little bit crowded as well, which means that you have to be really good to stand out. Anyway, on that note, I'll leave it at that. This has been the RPG Crawler with Indie Game Friday, Conglomerate 451. As always, I'll leave a link to where you can get it below. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you got any feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content, both tabletop and computer. Until next time, take care and goodbye. And if you're still watching this far, I'd like to take a moment to thank those who have supported this channel via Patreon or direct donations throughout the years, without which this channel could not have lasted as long as it has. For those who are feeling particularly generous, you can still support my work through Patreon and now through Subscribestar as well, through the links in the description below.